All right. Welcome into the Panther-Lair podcast for this week. We are live. I think everything is rolling here on the YouTube live stream. And, of course, the podcast. I should check the screen to make sure everything looks okay as we set up here for the podcast taping this week. Glad you could join in. Of course, there's a lot going on in the world of Pitt sports. And if you're on the live stream, we appreciate you joining in. People are just catching up, finding out that we are live and ready to talk a little Pitt sports. And if you are on the live stream, I apologize if you only see the same 5 photos there in that slideshow of football photos. I have like 112 photos loaded on the slideshow. And you're going to see like 5 pictures of Cal Adamitis and Deslin Alexandra. So I hope you like seeing those guys. I apologize that you're not seeing more of the photos to get you in the spirit of football here as we head toward spring camp. And that's what's coming up, is spring camp starting next Monday. And it's kind of crazy that it's already here. I mean, not to be the old guy who says, boy, time is flying by, but gee, it sure is. As we're almost to March already. And March means spring camp is going to be starting just really in a few days. Spring camp starts on Monday, March 2nd, I believe is the date. And it's that time again. And there's a lot to talk about with spring camp. There always is. I mean, it's your first bit of football since the bowl game, in Pitt's case, since the Quick Lane Bowl win over Eastern Michigan. It's been a relatively quiet offseason for Pitt. Obviously the transfer of Joey Yellen was big news. The transfer of Lucas Krull was big news. Signing the recruiting class almost all in December was big news. And you have those sort of regular bits of news that kind of happen all offseason. But maybe one of the things that stands out the most about this offseason, what's different the most about this offseason compared to previous years, certainly under Pat Narduzzi, and really going back a long time. I haven't sat down to think about this, but I can't remember the last offseason where Pitt didn't have any coaching changes. Head coach, coordinators, assistants, all of them are back from last year's staff. And it's never happened before under Pat Narduzzi. I don't think it ever happened under Paul Christ. I don't think Christ ever had the same staff 2 years in a row. Whether it was Bobby Ingram, there was a change with him, or what's his name? Brooks Bollinger. Remember, he was like the quarterback's coach, and I feel like there was another move made in there along the way over the course of those 3 seasons. Obviously, the Todd Graham year. I'd have to go back and look at Dave Wanstead's staffs and see if I could figure out the last time they went through a whole year without changing coaches during an offseason. And so it's unique in that regard. And that's maybe one of the big storylines that we look at as we head into spring camp 2020. One of the things that stands out is, look, it's the same coaching staff coming back for the second year in a row. And I think there's value in that. I think there's value in continuity. I think there's value in stability. I think there's value in the recruits, the value in the players going out and knowing who they're working with on a day-to-day basis in practice, that they're hearing the same voices in the film room. They're hearing, in the meeting rooms. They're hearing the same voices, speaking the same languages that they've grown accustomed to over the last few years. And we get a comment right off the bat on the YouTube stream from Noah Frederick. He says, are we not counting the strength and conditioning staff? No, you had to change there. Dave Andrews left. He went to Iowa State, and they bring in a new coach, Mike Stacchiotti. And so, yes, you have a change there. But if we're just talking about coaches, on-the-field coaches, and I know the strength and conditioning staff is important and it's significant, and you can't overlook the value that those guys have and the role they play and the interaction they have with the players and how important they are. There's no question about that. They're out there more than they are, more than the assistant coaches are, more than the coordinators and the head coaches are, and the head coach is. And so it's important, but if we're still just talking about the guys who are drawing up the plays, who are teaching the technique and the fundamentals, the on-field football coaches, there's no turnover there. And I think that's important. You start with the offensive coordinator where, we know Pat Narduzzi's had 3 in his first 5 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, had 3 in his first 5 years. He gets Mark Whipple back for a second year. Whatever you want to say about Whipple, and there's plenty to say, good and bad. I think it's better to not be learning a brand new offense again than it is to, obviously the opposite. be learning a brand new offense again. I think you'd have to, well, you don't have to agree with that, but I would say that it's better for these coaches and for these players to be working with the same coordinator for the second year in a row. Certainly for Kenny Pickett, I think that's important. For the overall growth and development and productivity of this offense, I think it's important that you have the same coordinator back. I think that's huge. And so staff continuity, I think, is one of the big storylines this offseason. I think it's one of the important things and one of the more notable, really, developments. And look, and that's not to say that nobody wanted to hire any of these coaches. I don't think Mark Whipple turned down any offers. I don't know about Randy Bates. But there were assistant coaches on this staff, at least 3 that we know of, almost positive, I would say, who were coveted by other schools, and other schools tried to hire them away, and probably even got to the point of conversations, but perhaps even interviews. And Pitt was able to do what it needed to do to keep those guys on staff, and that's a credit to Pat Narduzzi. It's a credit to Heather Lyke. It's a credit to the support of the university as a whole that they were able to keep this staff together. Pat Narduzzi wanted to keep this staff together, and he did. And all those staff changes we talk about from the past 5 years, most of them, I would say, were initiated by Pat Narduzzi. Matt Canada was not. Canada obviously left of his own accord, left because he wanted to go to LSU and get paid a lot. Jim Chaney was probably a mutual parting of ways. But other than that, Tom Sims, John Peterson, Kevin Sherman, these guys were, they were fired. You know what I mean? Sean Watson. These guys were fired. I mean, for lack of a better term, you try not to be coarse about it. You try to finesse the terminology, but that's what it is. You call it what it is, and they were let go. And so Pat Narduzzi wanted to keep his staff together. He was able to keep his staff together, and I don't think that's unimportant as you head into the 2020 season. A couple questions coming in here on the YouTube feed, and if you're watching, if you're one of our viewers now, we appreciate you checking in on the live stream. And look, you can get in right there in the comment section and ask questions. You can see a few people have already chimed in. Noah Frederick had his question about the strength and conditioning staff. Royce Beacom says, you were able to attend every practice? If so, how long? The short answer is no. The practice schedule, I think they do Monday, Wednesday, Friday the first week. Then they have a week off for spring break, and then they go Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday every week after that. Those 3 Saturdays, I guess it were, the first 3 Saturday practices will all be scrimmages. Those will be closed. The whole practice will be closed. We won't even be able to watch the field goal kicking and stretching at the beginning of practice. And then the final Saturday will be the spring game, and we're all allowed to go to that. And Pat Narduzzi is well aware of the fact that everyone, you, me, media, fans, everybody, we're all able to go, and the football coaches respond accordingly with what they do in the spring game. As far as what we're able to see during practice, we see some kicking, stretching, occasionally passes. No. Every practice that we watch, there are balls thrown in the air. Quarterbacks throw passes to wide receivers. There aren't necessarily any defenders out there. There isn't necessarily an offensive line out there, but they do throw passes. We get to see that. So it's not a whole lot, but that's the way Pat Narduzzi wants it. Lest I give away something that the mighty Miami of Ohio Redhawks could take advantage of and use to defeat Pitt in that season opener in 2020. We're not going to go down the road of talking too much about how much practice access we get or whether we get to watch practice or not. I mean, that's something we talk about all the time, and I feel like it's a topic. It's a topic that's, for better or for worse, more or less beat to death. You know where I stand. I wish we could watch practice all the time. I would like to see more practice. Just to have a better feel for the team, to be able to better report on the team, to have a better sense of what the real storylines are with the team. I think there's only so much you can gather out of interviews, and watching stretching and maybe get an early look at the 2-deep. There's only so much you can take out of that. And to really give the fans, I think, and it's what it is, it's for you, the Pitt fans out there, to give you guys a sense of who the team is. We need to see more than just stretching. But look, It's a battle that's not worth fighting. It's not a battle that I have any more energy to fight any longer. And we take what they give us in terms of practice access. Scott Lynch is on the YouTube live stream. We appreciate it. Scott asks a question: is Mark Whipple comfortable enough to not have Kenny Pickett run a marathon each game between plays? Scott, in honor of your question, we're going to get a beer out. And what we're drinking tonight is from Elysian. It's the Contact Hazy IPA. And, there's a bunch of words on the side about what this is. It doesn't matter. Let's just try it. Let's open it up before we answer a question about running to the sidelines. Contact Haze IPA. It's a hazy IPA. That's good. That's a good hazy IPA. What does it say? Bursts of bright raspberry, currant, citrus, guava, and passion fruit with a slight floral note. All right. You say so, Chief. I say it's a good beer. I say it's a flavorful beer. Now let's go back to Scott's question. Is Mark Whipple comfortable enough to not have Kenny Pickett run a marathon each game between plays? And of all the storylines that emerged from the 2019 season, of all the things that come out of that year, of all the things there were to talk about, of all the conversations to have about that team and the issues that held that team back, that caused them to go 8-5 instead of 10-3 or something like that, of all the things that we wasted oxygen on with that team last year, and this is no offense to you, Scott. You're a good Pitt fan. I think we've interacted on Twitter, potentially the message boards. Correct me if I'm wrong. Certainly right here on the live stream. You've been on the live stream before, Scott, and I appreciate your interaction. But damn, this is the worst topic that there is with Pitt sports. I would rather sit and talk about an on-campus stadium than this Mark Whipple, Kenny Pickett running to the sideline thing. It's just what they wanted to do. And it didn't cause a bit of, it didn't cause, it's not why they lost to Miami. And it's not why they lost to Boston College. Okay? It's not. And no other teams do it. Well, I don't care. It doesn't matter what other teams do. It doesn't matter if Clemson does it or doesn't do it. It doesn't matter if the announcers during the games make fun of it. It's just what they want to do. Kenny Pickett can manage trotting over and trotting back. And maybe a little bit of it is because they're worried about their signs getting stolen. I don't know what it is. Okay? There's been no real good explanation other than just that's what they like to do. They like to have a quick, brief little chat, and you don't have a long time. It's not like they're having a long conversation, but Mark Whipple likes to tell them to play and give them a quick idea, a reminder of what to look for. Dale Gribble says it's no big deal, and I agree. And again, Scott, this is no offense to you, man. I really appreciate you contributing here on the live stream. I know you were on the last one, and it's great to have you back again tonight. But Kenny Pickett might run to the sidelines again this year. Maybe they'll change that, and he won't do it. I don't know. I don't care. I could think of, I don't want to sit here and say I could think of 100 other things to talk about or 100 other problems with Pitt's offense last year because somebody might call me on it, and then I'd have to sit here and spend the next hour trying to think of 100 problems with Pitt's offense in 2019. But that one's pretty far down the list. I can think of a lot of things that are above that. So, I don't know what their plan is going to be. We'll ask, the first chance we get to talk to Mark Whipple or Kenny Pickett, we'll ask if he's going to run to the sidelines again. And then hopefully it's the last time we have to talk about it. But like so many topics with Pitt sports, we know it won't be the last time we have to talk about it. Mark Cerny has a question. Do any of the quarterbacks have a chance to unseat Kenny Pickett? What would happen if Joey Yellen wins his appeal? If Joey Yellen wins his appeal, of course, Joey Yellen, the transfer from Arizona State, coming in as a redshirt freshman, played in one game last year with the Sun Devils, but was beat out for the job in training camp by a very good freshman quarterback. Arizona State brought in like 3 freshman quarterbacks, and Joey Yellen was one of them. And he, by all accounts, everybody at Arizona State says he's a very good player, but somebody had to go. Somebody had to win the starting job, and chances were that if one of them did win the starting job, one or more of the others were going to probably leave. And Joey Yellen opted to transfer. He goes to Pitt, basically sight unseen. And he's here now. He'll participate in spring camp. They're going to try to get a waiver for him to be eligible to play in 2020. I don't know what the logic would be there or what the rationale or how they'll try and convince the NCAA to go for it. But they're going to try. If they were able to get Joey Yellen to be eligible for 2020, it would be very, very interesting. Because then your competition for the starting quarterback job gets really, really interesting. And look, he's a redshirt freshman. We're not talking about a guy who's coming in. It's not Nate Peterman coming in as a redshirt junior or a redshirt senior quarterback who's coming in having played for 3 years. We're talking about a redshirt freshman, and so that's the same class as Davis Bevel. That's a class behind Nick Patty. Those guys have every bit the experience that Joey Yellen has. I guess Yellen played in one game. He played against USC and played pretty well at that. You compare that to Bevel, who has not played in any games, and Nick Patty, who has one start and one complete game in the Delaware game, and also had a touchdown pass in the UCF game. There's marginal difference in experience there. But again, we're not talking about Yellen necessarily as a redshirt senior who's coming in who started 20 games in his career. He's still a relatively young player, but he's a pretty talented player by all accounts. And I think if he were eligible in 2020, it makes things really interesting. If nothing else, it gives Pitt another arm they can put out there as the backup quarterback. I don't think anybody's going to come back around to Mark Cerny's question here of do any of the other quarterbacks have a chance to unseat Kenny Pickett? They'll all have a chance. They'll all get reps in practice. They'll all work with the 1s and the 2s and the 3s. They'll all get plenty of opportunities to show what they can do, especially this spring. Do I think any of them will unseat Kenny Pickett? No, not really. I expect Kenny Pickett to be the starter, not because Pat Narduzzi automatically defaults to seniors. I think if he has a younger quarterback who's a better option, then he will go with that younger quarterback, like any player at any position. But right now, Kenny Pickett is the oldest quarterback on the roster. He's the most experienced quarterback on the roster, and quite frankly, he gives them the best chance to win right now. And I say that without having seen what Davis Bevel can do in a game or what Nick Patty. We've seen what Nick Patty can do in a game. And I don't think if you watch that Delaware game, I don't think you come away from it saying, boy, he's a better option than Kenny Pickett right now. Maybe down the road he is when he gets more experience and he's able to play more. But not right now. He wasn't a better option coming out of that Delaware game. The best option for Pitt is what they did, which is going back to Kenny Pickett. So, and I think Pickett will be the best option again in 2020. Pickett wasn't perfect in 2019. Yeah, I don't think anyone would say that he was perfect in 2019. But he was also far from Pitt's biggest issue on offense in 2019. Pitt's issues were many on offense in 2019. He was one of them, but he wasn't the biggest. He probably was outside the top 2 or 3. We had conversations on the message board, and there are some posters who like to say, Pickett was Pitt's best player on offense last year. And I don't entirely disagree with that. I'm not sure who else you would pick that really kind of front to back of the season, start to finish, was consistently good enough and did as much to help them win individual games. I think you put Kenny Pickett, you put the credit for almost all of Pitt's wins on Kenny Pickett. I think, and I'm not sure there's anyone else who would really say that about. So I think he was Pitt's best offensive player last year. I would agree with that assessment, and I think he should be leading the offense in 2020. Royce Beacom asks, have you made an analysis of how many positions are up for grabs? Let me see. All right. I hadn't yet, but let's do it. This is the point of the live stream. And this is what I really actually like about the live stream. It's not just that it's not at all, actually, that you guys can see me. You don't necessarily need to see me recording the podcast. But what the live stream allows us to do is interact a little bit more. We have a little bit more of a conversation. So you can get in the comments and respond to something I'm saying, or if you have a question, you can ask it, and then we can talk about it. We can have that conversation, which, is what is fun. So, Royce asked, what positions are up for grabs? Well, run through the lineup. You've obviously got a quarterback returning. Running back is up for grabs. I don't think A.J. Davis locked anything up last year. Maybe Vincent Davis. Maybe Todd Sibley comes back from injury. Izzy Bonaconda is here as an early enrolling freshman. There are guys who are going to compete for that job. They got to replace Maurice French at wide receiver. I think, you're looking at a top 3 of Taysir Mack and Shockey Jacques Louis and Jared Wayne, with Jordan Addison coming in as an early enrolling freshman. Michael Smith and Dontavius Butler-Jenkins are back. Aiden Henningham is here as a wide receiver, as a freshman who enrolled early. Jalen Barton from Georgia will get into the mix when he arrives in the summer. So you've got a bunch of people to compete for that, for the various receiver positions. I think you're going to see Mack, Jacques Louis, and Wayne as your top three, with kind of, effectively Shockey Jacques Louis replacing Maurice French, but you also have, Jordan Addison going to be in that mix as well, which will be really interesting. Along the offensive line, you have to replace one tackle, Nolan Alicio. You've got Gabe Hoy back. He played quite a bit at right tackle. You've got Carson Van Lin, who played as the backup at left tackle and probably could compete at right tackle. Jerry Drake will be in that mix as well. I think the interior of the offensive line is more or less set with Jimmy Morrissey at center and then Bryce Hargrove and Jake Cradle at guards. The tackle spots, in my opinion, all the spots should be up for competition other than center. I think Jimmy Morrissey has that locked down, but I think you look at the other four spots on the line, I think they should all be open to competition. I think Cradle and Hargrove will hold on to their spots. And then I think at the tackle positions, you really have a competition with like those guys that I just mentioned. Hoy, Van Lin, Drake, Carter Warren, who started last year, Matt Gonsalves, who redshirted last year. I think those guys are all in the mix to compete at tackle. And so I would I would open up all the offensive line positions. I was especially really focus on those two tackle spots. And then tight end, of course, you graduate Will Gregg and Nakia Griffin-Stewart, and you bring in Lucas Krull, who, if he's an upgrade, I think it does a lot for the offense and really kind of opens up the possibilities of what the offense can be in the passing game. I think they can really do a lot more with a tight end who can, catch the ball. Defensively, they have 7 guys back who started in the bowl game. But really, it doesn't feel like there are 7 open spots. So like defensive tackle, Amir Watts was a starter last year. He graduated, but you do have Keyshawn Camp and you have Devin Danielson. Danielson played a ton last year. Camp would have been a starter, but he got hurt and missed the season. You kind of have a returning starter there, even if you don't. At linebacker, you have to replace 2 guys, Salim Brightwell and Kylan Johnson. Johnson was at outside linebacker, but you've got 2 outside linebackers who played a ton last year and kind of split the starting job in Cam Bright, and Phil Campbell. So, I kind of feel like you're not really replacing Johnson. You've got the replacement already there with starting experience. Kind of the same way at cornerback. They have to replace Dayton Jackson, but Jason Pinnock and Damari Mathis have both started a lot. So you're kind of set there. Obviously, you're set at safety. The biggest one is middle linebacker. Middle linebacker is really where you circle and say, okay, that's the big, crucial open position right in the middle of the defense that they've got to replace Salim Brightwell, who probably wasn't as productive as you would like a middle linebacker to be. And really, it was just okay. I would guess Chase Pine would be the guy to step in there. I would guess Chase Pine will be the next starting middle linebacker at Pitt. He's got experience. He's played in a lot of games. He's got experience at middle linebacker. And so I think it would make the most sense. Wendell Davis is kind of lurking there in the wings. Perhaps Brandon George, although George I think might be more of an outside linebacker at this point. I'm not entirely sure on that one. But I would guess that Chase Pine is the one who steps in at middle linebacker and starts this season. And that's kind of your open jobs on defense. Really the only one that I really look at as a big area for competition is middle linebacker. That's sort of my take on it. So if you look at the whole team, you've got a lot of spots like the Maurice French receiver role or the tight end spot where you say, okay, that's open. They graduated a player who started every game last season or most games last season. What are you going to, how are you going to replace them? And I feel like the answers are sort of obvious. Lucas Krull is your starting tight end. Shockey Jacques Louis, Jared Wayne, Taysir Mack, those are your starting wide receivers. I think you could have competition at tackle. I think that's a key spot, and then your competition at middle linebacker. I think those are your 2/3 primary position battles, which is not a lot. You got a lot of guys coming back. You have a lot of experienced players returning. You have a lot of starters returning. And all of that means you better win a bunch of games. But we'll talk about that a lot more as time progresses. Stephen Case asks, have you set your road game travel schedule for football yet? Tallahassee for the first time? Yeah, actually, Steven, I am planning to go to Tallahassee. It's impossible to find flights into Tallahassee. Figured out that I'm just going to fly into Jacksonville, which seems to be working a little bit better until I found out that hotels for that weekend, for Halloween weekend, are ridiculously expensive. So got a pretty reasonable flight into Jacksonville. Book that, but I'm holding off on booking the hotel because it's absurdly expensive right now. So I need to sort of look at my options on what to do there. But yeah, be on the road for all the games this season. Look at this. That's 2019. Where else are they going? And to think off the top of my head, going to Virginia. We'll drive for that one. That's a nice, easy drive. If you haven't driven to Virginia, I highly recommend it. That's a good place to go. It's a good trip to make. It's a nice drive down there. It's a nice stadium, good environment. Crowd is nice. It's a nice trip to make. North Carolina, we'll drive down for that one. Probably do my little travel hack, pro tip, life hack thing to do when you're going to the North Carolina games. And this might not work for you if you are a fan who's traveling and you plan to drink during the game. When you're going to these North Carolina games, either UNC or Duke, or when they played at Wake Forest, get a hotel in Beckley, West Virginia. It's like an 8-hour drive to Chapel Hill, 8-hour drive to Durham, 8-hour drive to Wake Forest. Beckley's like 4 hours from Pittsburgh. So you drive down there. If you listen to the Drive Home podcast, you've heard me talk about this plan before. But you drive down there, you spend the night before the game, and then you just wake up early and drive to the game. And you get a long drive back, but it breaks up your drive nicely. You're not really doing an 8-hour drive. I'm too old for that, you know? Where else are they going? Oh, this year they're also going to Miami. So 2 trips to Florida, which can be a little expensive, but you'll have this, and then Marshall. That'll be a down and back. No overnight trips. Yeah, we'll make all the road trips this year. Might debate the Miami game. I don't know. People make such a big deal about Miami, South Beach, and all that. First of all, I've never gone to South Beach when I've been in Miami. So I've never partied with Pitbull or Vanilla Ice or any of those Miami guys, 2 Live Crew or anybody like that. I've never spent any time really kind of living it up in Miami. I think the best thing I did, me and Brian Batko from the Post-Gazette and Alan Saunders from the PG, I guess 2 years ago when Pitt played at Miami, in the regular season finale, we went and had a really good burger at a place called Le Tub. Letub, 2 words, Le Tub. I highly recommend it. The burger was awesome. The place was cool. I highly recommend it. If you do go to Miami, get a burger at Le Tub. Have a cold drink. You're on the water. Some water. It's not the ocean. I don't know what water it was. It was nighttime. Couldn't really see. But the burger was really good. You can ask Alan and Brian about that if you are so inclined. Let's see. Oh, Scott Lynch followed up on his previous question about the Kenny Pickett running the sidelines. And actually, I kind of made fun of the question. I didn't make fun of you, Scott. I just made fun of the question because it was such a topic. But Scott brought up another point, which actually is something to address. Scott said he shared his comments as somewhat of a joke, but you do wonder if the back and forth impacted the flow of the offense, getting plays off along with the false starts. I don't, actually, Scott. I don't think that's a problem because I don't remember this team really having a problem getting plays off. They didn't take many delays of game. They didn't take many delay of game penalties. Yes, they had a bunch of false starts, but I don't think it wasn't like the play clock was running down and Nolan Alizio jumped because he was, oh no, it's 1 second, I got to go. And that wasn't what happened. They really never had a problem getting the play off. And so I don't really think it interfered with the flow of the offense or getting the plays in. I think it took just as long as if they huddled up, signaled it and huddled up and then ran up to. I just think it was a non-issue. I really do, and yeah, that's kind of my final thought on the Kenny Pickett running the sidelines thing. The thing about spring camp too, and I have to bring it's like the annual caveat of spring practice. And this is going to be in the 321 column on Friday that we read on Panther-Lair.com. and it has to be said. We all have a lot of questions about this team. We all have a lot of concerns about this team and things we're wondering about this team. And we all know the recipe for what this team needs to do in order to be really successful, genuinely successful in 2020 and have some real success and really achieve something in 2020. We know what they need to do, right? The offense has to get better. Defense has to maintain its level of play and potentially improve, and the offense has to get better. But the thing is, and this is kind of the worst part of spring practice, we're not going to have an answer to that question. We're not going to have an answer to any of our questions. Barring somebody like leaving the team or something, we're not going to know anything about this team at the end of spring practice that we don't know right now. We might hear, we might come away with a sense of, well, this guy's looking really good, or that guy really moved up the depth chart, this guy did this, and that guy did that. And it's not going to matter one lick. Because by the time they get to August, and more importantly, by the time they get to September, when the season actually starts, it's all going to be, it all could be very different from what it was at the end of spring camp. You know what I mean? We all are going to walk out of the spring game on April 11th and think we have some ideas about this team. But the reality is we're not. Those ideas and observations and thoughts and criticisms and questions aren't really going to carry any value when the season actually starts. The only time we're actually going to know if this team improved, the only time we're actually going to have a definitive answer to where this offense is when they actually get on the field and play games in the season. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't follow along to the coverage of spring camp on Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. You see it right? Hold on. Let me make sure it's up. Yep, right there. Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget the dash. Oh, this is that side. Panther-Lair.com. Those are the headlines up there. That's some of the stuff that we published today. You can see the senior film review on Jalen Barden. Spring camp preview. We're looking at 5 newcomers to watch, 5 big storylines. Oh, there's the scholarship board. You can see what Pitt's scholarship situation is. We have it all at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And that's all the stuff we're running before spring camp even starts. We'll have even more content once spring camp gets rolling. So, and you should follow along with that. It's important to know what the storylines are and what the players are saying and what the coaches are saying, but it's still, we know that we're not going to know. And that's not just a product of Pat Narduzzi's media policies or the fact that we're not allowed to watch practice or things like that. It's not what it's about. It's about the fact that the coaches won't really believe that they know when you come out of spring camp. They'll have some ideas about things. They'll think that they know this or they know that. They'll have some thoughts on each player about where those guys stand. But I would guarantee you that every coach can tell you 25 stories or more of guys who had great spring camps and then didn't carry it over to August and didn't do anything during the season. And probably just as many stories on the other side where a guy didn't have a good spring camp and they were ready to write him off and wondering if he was going to just transfer down a level, and then he goes out and has a great season and they're surprised by how well he plays. So it kind of just doesn't carry any weight. And that what's frustrating, or not frustrating, but what's challenging is that this team has real questions it needs to answer. And we all have, people who watch this team have real questions about who they are and what they're going to be. And we're just not going to get those answers. We're not going to get those answers for another 7 months, which is unfortunate. It's a long time to wait. But that's what spring camp is. That's just the reality of it. Now, we are going to watch this offensive line. And we are going to see how these guys develop and what they do and who plays and who doesn't and if the depth chart moves around. And we're going to see what the players and the coaches all have to say. Because the offensive line, as much as anyone, has to get better in 2020. They need it for the running game. They need it for the passing game. Kenny Pickett, when you gave him time, he was all right. When you gave him time, he was solid. And made some really good plays at times. But once there started being pressure, or even the threat of pressure, things got a little off course. And that's one of the huge areas they've got to improve this offseason. And, and again, I mean, that's all just sort of the work they're going to have to do, practice to practice, with the offensive line, with Dave Borbley and those guys. But, I mean, I think so much of the focus this offseason has been centered around the offensive line, and rightfully so, because those guys didn't have a great season last year. And you look at the struggles in the running game was a big part of it. You look at the struggles in pass protection. I mean, both sides, they just didn't do very well. And I think Jimmy Morrissey's really good. I think the rest of the guys were all playing like first-year starters, which they were. And the right tackle never really improved. Nolan Alizio never got better. I mean, Carter Warren at left tackle never really seemed to improve start to finish. I think, Hargrove and Cradle were okay at guard. But those guys, I mean, they're all going to have to take a big step forward. And if it's not them, then someone else needs to take over those jobs and improve, and make the position better. It's crucial. It's crucial because this defense should be all that and a bag of chips. But it's not going to matter if the offense can't, step forward, and step up and play better than it did last year. You can't go around averaging 21 points per game or whatever it was. You can't have an offense that's in many ways demonstrably worse than it was a year ago. I mean, you fired the offensive coordinator and hired a new guy to improve the offense, and you get an offense that ends up being not as good in a lot of ways. Passing game was more productive, due at least in part to volume. The running game was non-existent. So the offensive line obviously is a big centerpiece of the attention this year. And then, it's interesting. When I was talking about the position battles earlier, I forget, Royce Beacom or somebody asked the question about position battles. And it's funny, I talked about this job and that job. I said, I think the offensive tackles and the middle linebacker are the big questions. Backup quarterback I was about to say it's not one of the more interesting topics, but, I mean, let's be honest. Backup quarterback is one of the more interesting topics. It always is, because when the starter struggles, everybody wants to talk about the backup quarterback. And so, I think it's a position of great intrigue, particularly this offseason. And that's not because I think Kenny Pickett's going to be replaced. I really don't think Kenny Pickett's going to be replaced. I think he's going to be the starter all season long without challenge. And I think I expect him to play well. I expect him to have his best season as a starter. But the backup is going to be really interesting. Nick Patty was the guy last year. Davis Bevel was a red shirt and was always headed for a red shirt. That was always going to happen. And it's why I think, if something happened to Pickett, they would have gone with Nick Patty, which they did. And if something happened to Patty when Pickett was out, they would have gone with Jeff George Jr. No, I don't think they were ever, I think it would have taken a unique situation to get Davis Bevel on the field. Even though they had the 4 games they could work with, they could get him a little bit of playing time and still preserve the red shirt. So Nick Patty was the backup last year, but this year it's a little more up in the air. I mean, it could legitimately be Patty or Bevel. And then if Yellen is ruled eligible, then it could be Yellen as well. And that's a pretty interesting position battle, because it's also, it's a position battle for the backup job in 2019, but it's also a bit of a primer for the coming position battle to be the starting quarterback in 2021. I said the backup quarterback job in 2019. It's a battle to be the backup in 2020, and it's a primer for the starting competition in 2021. Because regardless of whether Joey Yellen gets eligible this year, he's going to be eligible next year. And that means he's going to be competing with Davis Bevel and Nick Patty. And inevitably, when people talk about this, they talk about, and the loser's going to transfer. Probably. Probably. I don't know if, I mean, that's 3 guys you're talking about. I don't know if 2 guys transfer. But I think at least 1 probably will. And that's not based on any kind of insight or inside information or anything like that. But it's just based on looking at college sports. This is what happens. Quarterbacks don't win the job and they don't see a clear path to the job. They get out of Dodge and they go find what they think is greener pastures. And so, yeah, Pitt's probably going to lose a quarterback after spring camp or training camp next year. Just playing the odds here. Maybe Pitt will defy, the precedent of in the world of college basketball or college football right now, and hold on to 3 scholarship quarterbacks who are all right around the same class. But it seems highly unlikely. But either way, what's relevant to us right now is seeing who wins the backup quarterback job and then thinking about what that portends for 2021. Because you would think that whoever comes out of spring camp and training camp this year as the backup is going to have the inside track on the starting job next year. Unless they stick with Nick Patty as the backup because he's the most experienced guy. And then, if something really were to happen to Kenny Pickett, they would go with someone else long term. Or with Patty if Patty's the best option. But, you could see a situation where Patty would be the backup this year and then, a wide open competition next spring to see who wins the starting job. But I think there's a lot of intrigue around that backup quarterback competition. Royce Beacom says the biggest opportunity for a freshman to enter the starting lineup would be at running back. That's a question. And I'm not so sure about that, Royce. I think that Izzy Abanikanda has a really good chance at getting on the field. I'm not so sure if I see him winning the starting job, though. I think I'm not entirely convinced that A.J. Davis will be the starter. I wouldn't be surprised to see Vincent Davis be the first running back on the field for the Miami of Ohio game. Really. I know we all have questions about whether or not he can handle the load of being a full-time every down running back due to his size. Those questions are due to his size. I know we all have those questions. But I wouldn't be surprised, even if he's only getting 15 carries a game or less, I wouldn't be surprised to be him I wouldn't be surprised to see him be the first running back on the field and be the starter. So, I think Izzy Abanikanda, like I say, I think will get an opportunity to be on the field, and maybe he wins the starting job. But I don't know. I would, if I had to bet on a starting running back for that first game of the season, I would bet on Vincent Davis. Kent Nicholson, you think the freshman receivers can make a big impact right away next season? I'm not as optimistic about that happening as some others seem to be. Well, to tell you the truth, what's the best way to say this? I think some of the most optimism about those guys, about Jordan Addison and Jalen Barton getting on the field and contributing next year, a lot of that optimism, or most of it, that optimism, is coming from the Pitt coaches. Kind of like, not necessarily off the record conversations, but just different things you hear from the coaches and different things you pick up on from the staff. They have pretty high expectations for Jordan Addison and Jalen Barton. That those guys will be in the mix, contributing, and potentially contributing in big roles. Like, it wouldn't be a surprise to see them, at least one of them, in the top 4 receivers, like right after that group that I talked about of Mack, Wayne, and Shockey Jacques-Louis. Then potentially Jordan Addison, as maybe your number 4 wide receiver. Maybe with Jalen Barton as number 5. I think they are that good, and I think Pitt's depth also is not that great. And so when you've got that combination, you've got an opportunity for receivers to come in and play, and you've got Jordan Addison on campus already. This is another big part of it. He's going to have a whole spring to learn the offense and get comfortable working with Kenny Pickett. I think he's going to have a great chance to play. Or do and play a lot. Because you've got a combination of talent, as much time spent with the team as possible, and then opportunity and an opening for someone to come in and play. I think Jordan Addison at the very least, and I think Jalen Barton potentially as well, will get on the field and really contribute to this offense. And I think they're up to it too. I think those guys can be difference makers, potentially this year, and if not this year, then beyond. I think those guys can make a big impact. Andrew Vuvelis, I apologize, man, if I pronounce your name wrong. But he asked about Todd Sibley. I don't know what to expect out of Sibley. He got hurt in the Miami game last year, and I don't know. He didn't play the rest of the way. He was moving around. But I don't know. We'll have to see where he's at once spring camp starts. He might be limited again. But Sibley's interesting because he showed a lot of potential. He was the Miami game before he got hurt. He was really doing good. He had 4 carries for like 50 yards or something. And so, he was really good running the Wildcat. And, I think I think there's something worth exploring there because he's not the tallest guy. Sibley's not. But he's a little bit thicker than a guy like Vincent Davis. And I'd like to see a weight comparison of like him and A.J. Davis. It'd be really interesting to see how he fits in to that running back room. Dale Gribble follows up and says, I think the running backs on the roster are just not going to get the job done. And you might be right. There are questions about, the blocking. I think those running backs could have been better on their own, but even Pat Narduzzi himself, I remember I've mentioned this before. He had a comment mid-season. He said, I'd like to see A.J. Davis running through some of the holes that Quadri Olson and Darren Hall saw in 2018. And I think that comment really stuck with me because, and you go back and watch some of the games and some of the plays from 2018. Whatever you want to say about that offensive line, those guys could run block. And George Aston, go watch the film of Quadri Olson's 99-yard touchdown run against Virginia Tech. It's ridiculous. Olson, great individual effort by him. But the line and Aston, forget about it. Those guys, dominant. That's how you run for as many yards as they did in that Virginia Tech game. You have a dominant offensive line performance, and that's what they had, and they had it throughout the season. And that's why they were such a good rushing game, because that offensive line could run block like nobody's business. And so while I'm like you, Dale, and I'm like a lot of people that I'm not entirely sold on the running backs on the roster right now. I think Izzy Abanikanda is really interesting. Maybe that's because we haven't seen him on the field. I think Vincent Davis is good. I just, how much can he actually take at his size? A.J. Davis, I don't know. Todd Sibley, I don't know. Daniel Carter, I think, is a fullback now. So I'm not sold on those guys either, but I also don't think maybe they got the best, possible opportunity with the offensive line, with the run blocking they were playing behind last year. I really don't. So that's going to be pretty interesting to watch. Kind of scrolling through here, what else I wanted to talk about with this team heading into spring camp. We'll talk about a lot regarding the team as spring camp continues. In our podcast and the live stream here every Tuesday night, we'll have plenty to talk about with this team and just observations and things we're hearing from the coaches and players. Maybe we'll try and get some interviews and run them back, and you can, if you watch the live stream, I'll play an interview, and then I'll just sit here like this. And that'll be exciting to watch. Or I'll look at my phone. Yeah, hey, that's an interesting bit of news there. Can't wait to tell people about that later. Actually, you can't see what's on there, but might have something to post later. You like that little tease? If you're watching the live stream and you saw me hold my phone up, you couldn't see what was on the screen though. But we'll have a lot to continue talking about with the team. I guess my last thought on Pitt football heading into spring camp. Actually, on the live stream, you might not have seen me. Oh yeah, you saw a little flash. Spring camp. I guess the last thing I would really think about that. Defensively, like I said, I think there's competition in middle linebacker. That's a big competition. Otherwise, I think the biggest thing this spring is just staying healthy. I mean, don't get guys hurt. Be smart with Damar Hamlin and Paris Ford and, Phil Campbell and Cam Bright and, the defensive ends, Patrick Jones. Like, minimize the amount of contact drills those guys participate in. There's not a lot to be gained by having Patrick Jones go through contact drills this spring, honestly. There's not a lot to be gained by Phil Campbell playing Phil Campbell even playing in the spring game, or Patrick Jones playing in the spring game, or Jalen Twyman playing in the spring game. And I know these are the people that the fans want to see, and those guys I'm sure are going to play unless they do have any kind of lingering injury or nagging injury. But I just don't. I would limit it. I would minimize it as much as possible, because there's nothing to be gained by that, and you're only putting yourself in harm's way. Now, once you get to August, you want those guys to be, going out there and banging pads and getting ready for the season. But we're talking about March and April here. You do not want to potentially sacrifice one of your key players on the side of the ball that is your strength in spring camp. You do not want to take that risk, whether it's Damar Hamlin or Damari Mathis or Patrick Jones, Jalen Twyman. You do not want those guys, Jason Pinnock, you do not want those guys to get hurt. That's the key. So, yeah, Mark Cerny says 2 words for this spring: bubble wrap. Exactly. You can't risk it with those guys. So you got to be smart. Have to be smart about it. And that's my biggest thing with this defense. There's nothing I need to see out of this defense. There's nothing I need to hear from this defense. They're going to talk all spring, and I'm sure they're going to have a lot of swagger about them, and rightfully so. They were very good last year, and they should be even better this year. But the biggest thing is I every day I walk out to practice, I want to, the biggest thing I'm going to look for is anybody hurt? And that's all that really matters with that defense. All right, a little bit of hoops here before we wrap up. Regular season, the home finale, I should say, on Wednesday night against Syracuse. See what happens in that game. The Virginia game on Saturday was tough, and it wasn't just that. People talked about why Ryan Murphy couldn't get that shot off at the buzzer, but it's not about that, man. They played their tails off in those final 3 or 4 minutes. For as much as you remember, I was tracking Pitt's performance in the final 3 minutes. For a long time, at the beginning of the ACC schedule, I was tracking Pitt's performance in the final 3 minutes of games, and they were just terrible. They were just bad. They couldn't shoot to save their lives. Well, they turned that around against Virginia, and they crushed it in the final 3-4 minutes of that Virginia game. It was an awesome performance to watch. It really was. It was outstanding. The problem is that they had a 6-minute stretch at the beginning of the second half that totally sunk their hopes. They went scoreless for 6 minutes early in the second half. And that's what caused them to lose the game. Because if they don't go scoreless there, if they make a couple baskets, Virginia is the one trying for a game-tying shot. Now, different scenario. If Pitt makes a couple baskets, the game's a little closer. Maybe it doesn't play out the way it did in the final 4 minutes or whatever it was, that Pitt makes that furious comeback. But and 404 Strang says biggest thing in the UVA game was missed free throws. Yeah, and that was a big part of it too. But you can't have a 6-minute scoreless drought and then blame it on not getting up, a 3-point shot, a potential game-tying shot at the buzzer. I think there are complaints to make about that final play. Jeff Capel said, and I don't want to misparaphrase him here, but he effectively said he just rolled the ball onto the court and let them go do something. He said the play he called was just he said go play. He said get the ball into Xavier Johnson and go play. And I think you probably need to draw something up a little bit more than that. He said go play and hope that Ryan Murphy could get space to get a shot off. I think you could probably be a little more detailed in what you're trying to do there. Not in your explanation to the media, but I'm saying to have your players actually run something designed and set up. But that's neither here nor there. That doesn't matter when you have a 6-minute scoreless drought. You can't have stretches like that, especially not when you're a team that struggles to score offensively. But anyway, this Syracuse game on Wednesday night, they can win it. Of course they can. They could have beat Virginia. They have a lot of games that they could have won. Will they win? I don't know, because you never know. And I can't even say you never know what Pitt team is going to show up, because different Pitt teams show up over the course of one game. So you never know whether enough good Pitt teams are going to show up in a night to get a win. Let's see. Stephen Case asks, any Will Jeffress or Femi Odukali updates? And I apologize if I butchered his name. And then the Scabaloni family also asks, is there enough scholarships to get Femi and Jeffress for recruiting? So this is interesting. I actually did want to talk about this, the scholarship situation with basketball. Pitt put out their game notes for this Syracuse game, and of course it's the home finale, so it's senior night, and they said they're going to be honoring Kenny Chukwuka and Samson George. So those guys are done. They're off the roster as of after this season. So you take those two guys, plus Eric Hamilton, plus the one open scholarship spot that they didn't fill this season. You have 4 scholarship spots. So they've already got 3 guys signed: Max Madison, Noah Collier, John Hugley. So that leaves 1 open spot, and there's really 2 guys they're pursuing: Will Jeffress, who we've talked about, the wing from Erie, who reclassified from the 2021 class back to the 2020 class, and then Femi. Again, I apologize on his last name, Odukali, who took an official visit over the weekend. He's a point guard in this 2020 class. Capel's making kind of a late run at him. If they could get both of those guys, and it seems like Capel is trying to get both of those guys. If they could get both of those guys, it's going to mean one more instance of attrition is needed. It's going to mean that another guy has to leave the roster. A guy with eligibility remaining has to go. I feel like we've talked about this a little bit, maybe even speculated a little bit, probably a little bit more than I usually do when it comes to speculating about guys leaving the roster. But somebody's going to have to go if they get both of those guys. And given that Capel seems to be recruiting as if he's expecting to get those 2 guys or trying hard to get those 2 guys, I guess that's the way to say it. Given that Capel is recruiting and trying to get both of those guys, it seems like a pretty clear indication that he expects someone else to go. And we can speculate, you can guess, you can assume. I think there's a couple different ways that it potentially could go. But yeah, they would definitely, if they got those 2 guys, they need someone else to depart. Now, you get clarity with Chukwuka and Samson George. I think there was, Chukwuka is a senior. There was a potential that he could, try to get another year of eligibility and come back. And Samson George had another year of eligibility left, but he's going, which I think a lot of people assumed. Although there was a part of me that kind of always hoped, not always hoped, but there was a part of me that would have liked to have seen Samson George stick around for like the full eligibility, even though he just never plays. There's a part of me that would have liked to have seen that, but alas. Wednesday night will be the last hurrah for Samson George at Pitt. So what are you going to do? But it opens up a scholarship spot. It gives them more opportunity to get some of these other guys in that they want to get in. As you go down the stretch, Scott Lynch says, I think it's important that they win one more ACC game and have some bright spot at the end. After this Syracuse game, they have, 2 road games, NC State and Georgia Tech. Then they have the ACC tournament. I think there's a chance in there to win 2 more games. 2 road games are tough. Syracuse at home is tough. ACC tournament is tough. It would not be a surprise to see them go 0-4 over that stretch. I think they could win as many. I think they could win a couple of them too. And I agree that would be a bright spot, a way to end the season. That would be, like I say, yeah, it would be good to end the season on a high note. Now, even if you win an ACC tournament game, you're probably gonna lose the next one, or even if you win 2, you're gonna lose the third. You're not gonna win the ACC tournament. Although, wouldn't that be something? I think we know Pitt's not gonna put together that kind of a consistent performance. Not when they're having guys like Justin Champagnie and East Tony play 40 minutes a night, as they did on Saturday against Virginia. So, you can finish on a high note just by winning a couple of these games, showing a little more promise. I think ultimately your takeaways from this season are going to be what your takeaways are right now. I doubt anything in the next 4 games is going to change much in the way of takeaways. Takeaways being Johnson and McGowan's have to get better, improve his decision-making, improving their decision-making and improving their efficiency. And then Champagnie and Toney were revelations this season. Their emergence was, very welcome and, a real boost for the team. And then Terrell Brown is going to come back for one more year of doing Terrell Brown things. And that's the takeaway right now. And I think that'll be the takeaway 3 weeks from now, 2 weeks, whenever the ACC tournament comes to a conclusion. All right, check out Elysian Contact Hazy IPA. Highly recommend it. This is good. I've enjoyed it through this podcast. It's a bright orange can. I'm sure you can find it at any distributors and six-pack shops. I don't want to read all the words on the can to you. You can do that when you get it yourself. So Elysian Contact Hazy IPA. It's got a weird, trippy can on it, but it's cool. Make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. It's football, it's basketball, it's recruiting. We cover it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have the message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. All right there at Panther-Lair.com. You like this podcast that you're listening to or the live stream that you're watching, these are conversations that we have, especially the way we interact here on the live stream. These are the kind of conversations we have on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com all day, every day. We have it during basketball games. We have it during football games. We have it in the middle of the week, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the morning, whenever it is. We're always talking about Pitt sports on Panther-Lair.com. It's the best online community of Pitt fans, hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends right there at Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you check into the website throughout the game on Wednesday night. If you're not at the game, or even if you are, look on the message boards for the conversation, the game thread about that one. Saturday morning, tune in 8 a.m. to 93.7 The Fan for the Panthers Insider Show. For this live stream of the podcast, you can comment in the live chat, and we can interact and talk about Pitt sports. When I'm on the radio on 93.7 The Fan for the Panthers Insider Show, you can just call. You can call me, maybe, and we can talk about it then. We can talk, not face-to-face, but voice-to-voice about Pitt. So make sure you check that out. The Panthers Insider Show, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan. Of course, next Tuesday, we'll be back with another live stream of the podcast. Tuesday night, 8:30. We will try and make that. That's our regular habit. It's what we're trying to do. Tell a friend and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I think the button is down there somewhere. Somewhere down below is a subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really appreciate that. You can get notifications because we'll have reaction videos whenever things happen. When there's news, breaking news, we will get some reactions up on YouTube, and you can get a notification about it and know when we're doing things here. And in case you want to check in on the live stream, it'll let you know. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps us know that you appreciate what we're working on. So thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for checking out the podcast. Thanks for checking out the live stream. Thanks to everybody who commented in the live stream. You guys made it fun. It's always good to have these conversations. I enjoy it. I hope you did too. And make sure you check out the website. We will see you there. And we'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Thanks.